So ladies and gentlemen, I said that I was going to do a video of this, and I'm going to try to make it a bit quicker than 30 minutes. But my grandfather always taught me to work smarter and not harder. So before it starts torrential downpouring, I said I was going to do a video of this. And what that is a piece of PVC pipe, and that PVC pipe runs over to that location in the greenhouse. So this is a duck pond. I'm about a foot and a half, almost 2 feet on the bank of that. So I used a rototiller, dug that up, and just piled up the dirt around the banks. I've picked up stones over the years and moved stones around. Of course, I had a small little frog pond in the front yard. And of course the plants, you see what type of plants they are. They're very resilient, and the ducks are very happy with it in here, as you can hear their voice. So this is a pretty simple system. The overflow from the duck pond, what it does is it goes through a PVC pipe through the ground, and it's basically the exact same thing as my fish waste and my fertilizer down there. But inside my greenhouse, I have trenches. So I've dug trenches about a foot deep, and then I've put a barrier there, and then I've dug another trench, and then I've put another barrier, and I filled it all up with peat moss. So peat moss is absorbent, so my overflow comes out of that, and then the peat moss up here soaks it up. So it's going to be the strongest up here, but then by the time it gets leached down into here, it all starts becoming, how can I say, a bit more palatable for the plants, but it's not in direct contact with the plants. Now what happens here is, you can see this bag right here, how this wicking bag is wet. So when you use peat moss, what happens is right there. So I've got about a foot of water right here, and it's in peat moss. So there's peat moss down there, so you can see the color of it. So you see all that water, and it hasn't rained for a couple days here. So usually most people have to water their gardens like maybe once a week. But I'll go ahead and pull some of this straw back here. So there's peat moss, and possibly a frog that just ditched it. So there's peat moss down there, and then I've got a notch cut down there, right there. And that goes out to that piece of PVC pipe. So down here at the lowest point, I've got a drain so it won't overflow. So yeah, that's boggy. Yeah. So what you do here is you take your peat moss bag and you put it on top of that, and then what happens is it soaks into that bag. So then your plants regulate how much moisture you need. So as you see the growth here, these things right here are about 2 weeks old, and that big old monster right there that you don't want to play with. You see what kind of spider that is. So I've got a liner down here to keep the moisture in. So that's the point behind this, is I've got a wicking bed. So this entire thing's called a wicking bed. So then you take those peat moss containers, and like I said, you just have to make contact with where the moisture is at, and then it will soak up into the bag on its own. I've even had roots penetrate through the bottom of those bags in order to get to the nutrients. Now, if you don't have, how can I say, you don't have all the peat moss and things like that, what you can do is you can dig a trench along the side of your greenhouse or along the side of your garden, or you can do irrigation channels inside your garden if you're planting in the dirt. So everything does what it needs to do. And just to show you proof of the ecological system that I have here, that's a frog. And if you have frogs in your garden, that means you don't have pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals, because the frogs aren't going to want to be there. So the frogs are going to want to be in locations where there's the correct pH as well as what is required for growing. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll do a backup here. So those are my little compost containers right there. So I'll put my organic in that, and then I'll take it over to my composting bin, composting location, which is right there. So if you've ever had chickens before, ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand what chickens will do to your property and what chickens will do to your yard. So that's a chicken run over there, and you see how that's nothing but dirt. Now, The chicken runs, some people like chicken runs. If you like chickens, well, that's all right. But you have to contain chickens, but you can't have chickens in a garden, in an open garden, because they will fly over the fence. And you see what I've had to put up here in order to keep the chickens out of my asparagus. I've also had to put up a greenhouse with chicken wire to keep the chickens out. So I've chosen to use ducks. So the use of ducks, what that does is that gives me 3 eggs a day per duck. And these are rowan ducks, but then the type of food that is foraged from the ducks then ends up in this location right here, and then it ends up going down that drain into the greenhouse. So as my duck comes creeping up on me, yeah, so they're pretty happy about it. They kind of grouch at me because I don't fill it up all the time, but that's my rowan. You see how she's kind of dragging on the ground there. She dropped 3 eggs today, so you're looking at 3 eggs per duck. So that's 3, 6, and 9. So that's 9 eggs per duck per day. I can't eat 9 eggs per duck per day, but the last time I checked, a carton of duck eggs goes from anywhere from $8 to $19. Duck eggs are lower in cholesterol and they're healthier for you, to my understanding, but the most important thing about ducks is ducks eat slugs, and not only do they eat slugs, is ducks don't tear up your yard. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Russ, and I'll do a backup and show you the entire thing here. So my duck pond is higher up than my greenhouse. And then I've got a big teardrop shape with a water feature up here. And then I've got the greenhouse. So that pipe right there runs into the greenhouse and the overflow goes into that greenhouse. So I don't have to water that greenhouse, but whenever I do water the greenhouse, all I have to do is fill up the duck pond. So if the duck pond is the regulation area, but the interesting thing is every time I fill up that duck pond, I'm adding a fertilizer, but I'm adding a decomposed fertilizer to my greenhouse, but I'm adding it to the peat moss. And then what happens is it then transfers through the water into the saturation bags, which are the wicking bags. So that's why I use the wicking bag setup. And of course, with all of my herbs and my homeopathics and my produce and my vegetables, you always have to make sure that your pHs and things like that are balanced out, especially if you're growing produce that isn't intended to be for your area. So if you have produce that grows naturally in your area, it's great. You just put your seeds out and they'll take care of what they need to do. But if you have to add nutrients or fertilizers or balance your pHs and things like that, or in a situation to where even if you take a concrete block and you set it on top of that peat moss and then you put your pot on top of that peat moss, sometimes those concrete blocks can wick up some moisture. So you would be amazed at what happens with types of systems that don't really necessarily require you watering them once a week. So this is a self-irrigation and a self-fertilizing system by use of organics as well as use of different types of produces like ducks, duck eggs, you've got your vegetable produces, you got your meat, your poultries, you've even got your feathers, but ducks are a great replacement for pork. So if you enjoy your pork, duck is pretty fatty, but it's kind of minerally depending on how you raise your duck. But I've had duck sausage before, and I've understood that duck sausage tastes quite a bit better than pork sausage. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I've been telling you that I've been doing, and this is how long it's taken me to do it. So the entire project, I'm looking at about 3 to 4 years, and that's including savings, but I'm on a fixed income. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Russ. Have an amazing day.